Hello everyone, once again from the dystopian capitalist monarchy of the United Kingdom. Now, recently in the UK, we had an American-funded far-right conservative conference where Nazi-era conspiracy theories were promoted in front of the eyes of the UK, and it was labelled National Conservatism. Now, despite it having a name like National Conservatism, it must be the complete opposite of National Socialism. Didn't you know Hitler was actually a socialist? Well, if Hitler was a socialist, I don't think so many far-right types would love him or parrot what he's saying. And today we are talking about Hitler because there has been a new trend on YouTube, and that is translating Hitler speeches with English subtitles. Now, this actually used to be a thing years ago, but it seems like YouTube really cracked down on actually translated Hitler speeches. But there's been a couple new channels that have been publishing them with full English subtitles. Now, a lot of these speeches, which I'm not going to show you, but I'm going to give you the gist of what's in them, because I don't want to get copyright striked by channels that post Hitler speeches, but basically the gist is a lot of these speeches don't contain anything like overtly racist, anti-Semitic, although you can easily see it that way if you know like basically anything about the Nazis and Hitler. It doesn't have that, but the comment section, go on the comment section of the videos I'm going to show you today. Most of them are praising Hitler. And what I wanted to do today is just kind of like expose how these Hitler speeches in the comment section are becoming like a safe haven for Nazis just to say random stuff about Hitler and how great he was, but also just kind of debunk a lot of the myths and talk about kind of how people fall in to revisionist history about Adolf Hitler. Because a lot of people will say kind of positive things about Hitler without actually knowing that this is a myth. Because the historiography of World War II is quite complicated in that you actually have a lot of Germans who fought in the war really influencing the history and how it was told. But there's just a lot of myths about Hitler. And I made a whole video about how Jordan Peterson basically pushes revisionist history about Hitler to make him look better for some bizarre reason, and to make communists look worse. You often hear things like he was an amazing leader, he rebuilt the German economy, like how amazing. If only he didn't do the Holocaust and start World War II, he might have been good. And that is kind of like the false history non-Nazis often start looking into and promoting and parroting. And of course, actual Nazis love that because you're essentially sanitizing and whitewashing literally like the worst guy in human history. But we're going to see a lot of that in the comments section, and a lot of these myths pop up. So what I thought I'd do is just kind of show you what's been happening and read you like the most insane comments, but as they come up, we're going to talk about a lot of myths, including like history is written by the victor, which is a pretty nonsense term, but it's constantly pushed by actual Nazis to try and act like everyone was given a false history about the Nazis because they lost the war, which, like I said before, lots of Germans had a big input in the history of the war. So we're going to talk about all of that today. Before we go any further, please like the video, follow me on social media at the Kavernacle. And this video will obviously be demonetized considering what I'm actually talking about. So if you want to support my work, support me doing more videos like this in the future, consider becoming a patron. Benefits include access to the Discord server, access to my Nintendo Switch friend code. There's also some bonus Patreon-only content on there, and I have just launched my podcast on Monday. That's up on the main channel, but there will be exclusive podcast episodes on the Patreon itself, and I'm trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible. So if any of that sounds like something you're interested in, or you simply want to support my work, consider becoming a patron. So it's fair to say most people across the political spectrum in Western countries, in allied nations that fought in World War II, they agree that Hitler is a terrible person. Of course, contempt and hatred for Hitler is stronger on the left, who actually understand his whole ideology. But yeah, it's fair to say most people who say Hitler, they think bad guy. As we've talked about in other videos, I don't think a lot of conservatives in America would think he's so bad, because they seem to agree a lot with Nazi ideology. I made a whole video about that. But yes, this version of Hitler that is widely understood in the West is a bad one. But there are some caveats to that, in that Jordan Peterson said in this podcast, you have to give the devil his due. And he was basically saying a bunch of stuff, which is untrue about Hitler, and basically saying, you've got to hand it to Hitler in these aspects.
You're pointing out the danger of assuming that you can put Hitler in he was just a monster box and don't think about it anymore. And I would say I agree absolutely with that. I mean, I've studied Hitler a lot, and there's a bunch of things that you can't say about him. You can't say he was stupid.
Right.
You can't say he was without artistic talent. You can't say that he was a poor organizer. You can't say that he wasn't charismatic. You can't say that he did wonders for Germany's economy in the first part of his reign. It's very necessary if you're dealing intelligently with a true monster that you give the devil his due.
No, Jordan Peterson, you don't have to hand it to Hitler, and also you're lying. And he has a history of doing this. I made like a whole video, like I said. He constantly just pushes out loads of lies about Hitler and ignores a lot of the anti-Semitism. And my conspiracy theory is he ignores a lot of the anti-Semitism because it's inherently tied up with anti-communism, and he's a massive anti-communist, and he talks about cultural Marxism. The Nazis talked about Judeo-Bolshevism as a main reason to do the Holocaust. I don't think he wants to draw attention to how similar a lot of these things are. But him saying, like, Hitler rebuilt the economy, Hitler was a great leader, blah, 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 that is common, right? A lot of people think that. A lot of people think he worked an economic miracle in Germany, through, like, conventional capitalism or something? Or could it have been completely on colonialism and theft of the German population who didn't either conform to Nazism or weren't in the in-group of the German Nazi Party, for example, stealing Jewish businesses, stealing Jewish homes, stealing Jewish property? Does anyone ever talk about that? But I'm going to save that a bit for later, but also I'm going to talk about a bit more is that a lot of people who fought in the war, including for the SS, but also the Wehrmacht, they had a big input in the history of the war, and that's why you have historical myths like Asiatic hordes from the Soviets. So lots of people think that the German army were amazing, literally the best fighting force on the planet, and the only reason the Soviets could beat them is because the Soviets just sent wave after wave after wave of these Asiatic hordes into battle, and that's the only reason the Nazis lost, because they're actually superior at fighting, completely ignoring that the Soviets had better tactics, and during like the midpoint of the war were actually far better armed. But it's fair to say a lot of Western history of World War II is influenced by the people who fought for the bad side and not the people who fought for the good side. The Soviet accounts are often ignored, while the Nazi accounts are promoted way too much. But now let's get into Hitler's speeches on YouTube. Now, like I said, a lot of these have been taken down. I'm going to read you what the speeches said in some of them, but a lot of them aren't even translated. So let's start on this one. Hitler speeches stock footage. These are just Hitler speeches, right? No translation. Most people watching this aren't German, so they don't understand what he's saying. So let's get into some of the comments. This one is relatively tame compared to the other ones. I guess when you can actually read what he's saying, you can talk about how much you agree with it, but it blows my mind that one of the most evil men in history, at least it's acknowledging he's evil, also happens to be one of the most talented public speakers the world has ever seen. Fascinating. Someone saying, he wasn't evil. Quite the opposite, actually. This is the most inspirational speech I ever heard. Their reactions enough to testify his speaking skills' psychological effect. The man wanted to bring his nation prosperity, but at the cost of others. Almost felt bad for the guy. Then you have more stuff like this. In seriousness, he reinstated faith and honor in men and brought sanctity to the land. If one forgets the awful and misleading usual propaganda designed to hide the fact of economic and spiritual rejuvenation due to his leadership. Again, a very popular myth we're going to get into a bit later. He was very misunderstood. He is the most lied about man in history. Legends never die. This man is brilliant. So obviously you get a lot of pro-Nazi comments in Hitler videos, but let's go on to the next one. Hitler fires great Nazi rally. So this is just a video of just a Nazi rally. It doesn't even have Hitler speaking that much in it, but it has a few speeches. Again, not translated into English, but you get loads of pro-Nazi comments here. The Mount Vernon Project DIY, the reason why they loved him so much and why they keep him under wraps is because he restored their dignity and put them back to work. They don't teach you this, but the Allies creating him with ruthless punishment and financial looting after World War I, he rearmed them, rebuilt everything he could militarily, set out to save all the lands lost in World War I. Many ethnic Germans were treated horrendously. He was a World War I vet with an air cross. He was a fanatic. He was crazy effective. It's basically saying he's admirable. And that's what you get from a lot of people who aren't, like, maybe strictly speaking Nazis, like Jordan Peterson. They seem to admire Hitler. and I just find this totally insane. They admire a genocidal, incompetent paedophile because they either buy into a mythicized version of him or they just promote a mythicized version of him for some reason or another. You can decide who is doing it because they're Nazis and who is doing it because they hate communists so much they'll happily side with fascists. This is another video without English subtitles, so does anyone think it's weird that I can't find any videos of his famous speeches on English subtitles on YouTube? Only on websites that big media back. They don't want you to know the truth. 90 likes. If you listen to what he says, you may begin to understand how things are. They fear his speeches. These are just like random videos with Hitler in them speaking, but none of these comments really, apart from that one guy, actually understand what he is saying. But of course, it's a Hitler video. You're gonna get a load of Hitler simps flooding the comments. And honestly, anyone who uploads a video like this, I think should turn the comments section off just to be like responsible. Like, don't give actual Nazis a place to gather and talk about how much they praise Hitler, but also you're spreading more revisionist history about him. Like all these people saying he had admirable qualities, he protected ethnic Germans, he rebuilt the economy, all these myths about Hitler. And lots of people today are very ignorant about World War II. In particular, Americans. And Americans who don't even know what the Holocaust was is quite a high percentage. And Marjorie Taylor Greene herself didn't seem to know what the Holocaust was, because you remember she was making comparisons between that and COVID before actually being educated, and then she took it back in a statement. I mean, you can say a lot about the American far right like her, but I genuinely do believe she probably didn't even know what the Holocaust was, apart from this vague notion of Jews getting persecuted. So when you have people like, I don't know, Jordan Peterson, and you have comment sections like this, saying loads of untrue things about Hitler, and you don't know anything about Hitler or World War II, like you hardly know anything apart from like Holocaust is bad and the Holocaust happened, but you've never really been taught about it properly, you've never been taught about history of World War II properly, so you have people saying he's the most lied about person in history, he was right, they watch a Hitler speech out of context, and they're like, well, what was the problem with this guy then? But why I wanted to make this video is not based on some random Nazis in some random, like, old comment section of a Hitler video. It's more about, there's a new channel out called History Channel Japan, which, to be fair, posts loads of speeches from various different things and has English subtitles or has Japanese subtitles if it's in English. So if we go on the most recent uploaded, you have a JFK speech, you have a Hitler speech, you have a Harry Truman speech, you have a Malcolm X speech, you have another Hitler speech, you have a Tojo speech, another Hitler speech, Bin Laden, Putin speech, Queen Elizabeth speech, Mao speech, Gandhi speech. If I'm being very, very kind, I'm saying this channel is legit just posting speeches and translating them, if I'm being kind. But if I go on the most popular on this channel, the most popular videos it has, then we're running into a bit of a problem here. So, Hitler speech, 7.4 million views. Another one, 1.7 million views. Another one, 1.7 million views. Goebbels' speech, 1.3 million views. Now, of course, in some countries, you aren't even allowed to access this stuff. So they post, several videos are no longer available in Germany due to an application by the German government. Other countries and regions can view them with no problem. And I've watched these speeches myself, so obviously in the UK, they aren't banned from this channel. And the person running this channel also did a poll. What language do you usually use? Has 7.3 votes, and 38% say Japanese, and 35% say English. So a lot of Japanese people clearly watching these speeches, including Hitler speeches, and don't worry, I am going to touch on Japan's relationship with Hitler and the Nazis. Unless this channel is like a Puritan in that I must post these speeches and I'm a free speech absolutist and I should keep the comment section open, I think there's a bit of an obligation on a channel like this, which is the only major channel I can find that posts Hitler speeches with English subtitles, like maybe turn off the comment section, because most of the comments in the comment section are praising Hitler and the Nazis. And like I said, this could be from Japan, but also people saying positive things about Hitler from Japan, I guess, probably isn't seen as so bad as someone saying positive things about Hitler from Europe, for example. There actually are Japanese politicians who have said Hitler is good, and we can tell this guy's audience has a lot of Japanese people in it. So, 2017, Japanese minister Taro Aso praises Hitler, saying he had the right motives. Japan's finance minister Taro Aso has courted fresh controversy after expressing admiration for the Nazis, describing Hitler as having the right motives. Hitler, who killed millions of people, was no good even if his motive was right. It's not the first time the gaffe-prone Aso has made controversial remarks about the Nazis. In 2013, he came under pressure to resign after suggesting that Japan should follow the Nazis' example when considering how to change its constitution. His comments came soon after another public figure in Japan attracted criticism for voicing admiration for the Nazis. So Katsuya Takasu, a well-known plastic surgeon and TV celebrity, highlighted the Nazis' contribution to science and medicine and appeared to deny the Holocaust. He said he had learned how great Nazism was, and there is no doubt that the Jews were persecuted, but we only know it from hearsay, and all of that is based on information from the Allies. So another Japanese person, Yutakata Harada, a member of the board of Japan's central bank, praised Hitler's wonderful fiscal and monetary policies, but said they enabled him to go on and do horrible things. I'm not saying these people in Japan saying pro-Hitler stuff didn't spark controversy. I'm just saying the environment in Japan for being pro-fascist in World War II is a lot higher, because literal prime ministers of Japan in the post-war period were fascist war criminals, and they are honoured by the Japanese government. I'm giving you that context to just keep in mind when we're looking at this channel, because, like I said, based on the polling, it has a lot of Japanese people watching this. There are also Japanese subtitles if you click the subtitles option in the settings. So like I said, with Japanese people watching this as well, this is why you might get some more pro-Hitler stuff when they're so divorced from the reality of the war on Europe from Hitler, but also they're from the side that sided with Hitler, and they never had to properly reconcile that as a society through the education system, especially younger generations today, since the Liberal Democratic Party have completely changed the education system to pretty much omit their role in World War II, along with a lot of fascist war crimes. So just keep that in mind for this video. So the first video we're going to look at, Hitler's speech at Siemens factory, I was one of you. Now, like I said, I'm not going to play you the speeches, but I'm just going to read you a summary of what he said. So Hitler says in the speech he comes from the workers' ranks and educated himself up the ranks, started talking about blood and soil and an international clique of foreign interests, which he's obviously meaning Jews here, saying they conduct business everywhere, but he only wants to appeal to the worker and the farmer. Then goes on to say he eradicated the Marxist parties and basically all the political parties. He then talks about how he halved the unemployment rate from about 600,000 to 300k in 9 months, which he says is amazing, and he focused on his own people, saying the German people want to be left alone and don't want people to interfere with Germany. So obviously, you know, you read that speech, you think it's pretty ridiculous that he's saying Germany just want to be left alone when they invaded like the whole of Europe. Countries that didn't even have a border with Germany, they invaded. Like, obviously, completely full of shit. If you believe that, you're just such an idiot. But don't worry, most comments here are pro-Nazi. So 13k likes. It's rare we get unaltered footage of Hitler making his speech as it was at the time. No dark gloomy filters, no dark gloomy background music, no cuts and narrators reminding you they're the bad guys every 10 seconds, just the footage. So this is the most popular thread, and it's where I want to talk about some stuff. So history is only written by the winners. He lost. Although fighting the 3 most powerful countries in the world at the same time is objectively insane, end of story. This needs to be shown in every history class. They kind of do, but with commentary saying how evil and crazy he was, without having anyone actually listen to him. What people think this speech is about, what the speech is actually about. The fact this gets over 1 million views in a month is incredible. People are really interested in this mysterious and forbidden man. I'm African and I agree with him and his party to the fullest. Yep, I bet you're African. Anyone actually going down the rabbit hole understands that history is written by the victor. The victors always portray the losers in the worst possible light. Thank you for saying this. The world will wake up soon. But I just hope they do before it's too late. 100% agree. After seeing English subtitles in a lot of his speeches, I'm inspired. America is almost in the same boat Germany was. The love and admiration of this man by this people has never been replicated. It's amazing to me a new Hitler has not arisen already. Given the appalling weakness and craven cowardice of nearly all our political leaders, a man of passion and vision would stand out very easily indeed. Great speech, one of the greatest men in history, also one of the most lied about in history. Men don't follow titles, they follow courage. He came from nothing, returned to war as a soldier 3 times after sustaining injuries that could have given him more than an excuse to quit, was shot at and imprisoned and never wavered on what he believed in. Even those who hate him have never confidently muttered coward. Love these comments, gives me hope that there's still men out there who know the truth and are ready to fight for it. Stay strong and be safe. I usually don't have subtitles because I don't want people realizing what he is saying is actually super based. One thing nobody could ever accuse Hitler of is neglecting his people. Not only that, but pay attention to his rhetoric about jobs and the economy. He never once gives himself credit while talking about the economic odds that were overcome. He gives all to the German people. We will never forget this man's heroic struggle. The fact that Hitler actually narrowed unemployment down is crazy. Nowadays, something like that is impossible. And we're going to talk about that as well. So if you don't believe me, go on to the comment section of that video, and you don't have to go far to find a lot of pro-Hitler comments. But I wanted to address 2 things that came out in the comment section, because a lot of people here are obviously Nazis, a lot of people might be ignorant. So the first one is, history is written by the victor, which is a really popular saying. It's in like loads of movies. I remember it in being like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, like General Shepard saying it a bunch of times. Now let's discuss this generally, right? So history is not written by the victor. Let's take a historical look at this. And of course, you know, I have my lovely history degree, read a lot of historical documents. So something I'm really into lately, especially since I finished university, is like the history of England since the Romans left. Now, if you guys know your history, you will know a lot of pagan groups did not write anything down in books. Sometimes they carved stuff onto stone and stuff like that, but nothing that coherent that they can have a whole history that most people can understand. But the groups that did write stuff down in history were groups like the Romans, the Chinese, and just Christians generally, especially Christian monks. So a lot of the history of the medieval period is written by Christians. And when they're fighting pagan groups, the history of the pagan groups is written by Christian monks. I remember there's this diary by a monk who was in Hungary, I think, when it was getting invaded by the Mongols. And he was talking about it being like the end times. And our primary knowledge of the Mongols in that period is from people being attacked by the Mongols and losing to the Mongols. And when we look at England, which was obviously conquered multiple times by Scandinavian groups, and the history of that time is largely written by Christian chroniclers. Christian chroniclers who thought like Vikings were sent by Satan to destroy Christians because they weren't being that holy or something, right? So that's the knowledge of it. It's always tinged with these biases that are sometimes hard to unpack and unpick, because although you realize this person has wrote history in this way because of their bias, there is no counter to it because we don't have a similar Scandinavian account from the pagan times. So despite many Anglo-Saxon English losing in wars to Viking groups, they still got to write the history of the era and the history we come to know today. And this happens all the time. It's the group that writes down stuff. China and Chinese associated groups as well, where they wrote stuff down and wrote histories, or sometimes Indian as well. Societies that wrote stuff down traditionally wrote the history. And a lot of the times they lost, but they still told the world what happened. And it's always going to be tinged by either their bias or they're making stuff up to make their side look better, especially when you have the whole religious motivation in there. So history, yes, can be written by the victor, but the notion that the victor can always manipulate history to what it wants it to be is basically a myth and has been debunked a load of times just by history, right? So if we're talking about World War II, it gets more silly as well, because the victor did have a hand in writing the history, but it's immediately informed by the Cold War, which starts just after World War II. And of course, although America did side with the Soviet Union against the Nazis, it was a marriage of convenience because the ultimate enemy of America and the American elite were communists, and the communist revolution springing up all over the world. So much so, America, Britain, and then later NATO, they sided with actual fascists to put down communist movements. They literally let people off who did the Holocaust in places like Greece to put them in the new government and help them put down communist uprisings, communists who had actually fought the fascists in World War II and eventually won and liberated Greece, right? So there's a victor not only not being able to write their own history, they're being violently suppressed by the loser. And in that, like I was saying, lots of German people and German people who fought in World War II had a big input in how the war was depicted. And like I was saying earlier, That's why you get so many myths about the Soviet Union and how the Soviet Union was basically the same as the Nazis. And that's where this image comes from, is that both these sides were basically just as bad as each other, but also the Soviets were far less competent than the Nazis. Like I said, Asiatic horde myth, that they just threw numbers at the Nazis, and that's the only way they could win. So the belief that Hitler only has a bad reputation because the Allies wrote a bad history about him is frankly ridiculous. But also, because the Allies were so anti-communist, loads of myths about the Nazi military and Hitler have been allowed to flourish. Like you've seen in the comments right there, and it ties in nicely. They're talking about what a wonderful job Hitler did with the economy. Hitler was an economic genius, according to these people. Jordan Peterson, intellectual, gives lectures on Hitler. He says this about Hitler when it's blatantly untrue. And if history was written by the victors to make Hitler look as bad as possible, it seems to have left a lot out, and that's mainly because of anti-communism. They don't want to tell real history because they don't want you to sympathise more with communist movements around Europe and around the world who fought fascism in World War II. But on that note, I don't want to repeat myself from that Jordan Peterson video, and I feel like I summed this up pretty well in that video, so I'm just going to share you a clip of me discussing the myth of the amazing German economy prior to World War II. And spoiler, it's not because Hitler was the best economist who ever lived, it's because the whole Nazi economy was propped up by literal theft, murder, and colonialism.
So there's a really good article I was reading today which just goes into a bit more detail, apart from like the theft obviously of like Jewish businesses, Jewish properties, alleged Marxist properties and Marxist businesses. It just talks about how Germany's economy wasn't really that remarkable, even though it was built on like genocide and theft. So the not so good Hitler years. So the so-called good Hitler years in the mid-late 1930s still persist as a myth. You heard Jordan Peterson just say it. But at closer scrutiny, the myth falls apart. In extremely simplified terms, his economic policies were based on the idea of growth through conquest. To perform his conquest, he needed the growth of the economy and increased resources, which could only be won by conquest, and that's a circular self-referencing system that cannot work. German growth in the 1930s was not extraordinary compared to other Western countries. In fact, it was slightly below European averages. The only way you can see it as being great is if you compare it to the dismal years of hyperinflation in the 20s and the short-term dip of the German economy after the 1929 crash. The delta between the years before Hitler came to power to after might be huge, but compared to normalcy, it is not extraordinary. Moreover, as growth was starting from a heavily contracted economy after the crash, growth in real numbers was not as impressive as a percentile growth should indicate. As we shall see, this growth created artificially in preparation for conquest of resources and economic might. It is specifically here that the catch-22 of needing growth to conquer to create growth negates any possible effects. So here is just a graph of Germany's economy over the years. As you can see from the chart, Hitler didn't create growth in GDP that was any higher than the previous normal post-World War I years like 1927. Before 1927, reparations were still impacting the German economy, and as of 1929, the Depression pulled it down. As you can see, there's a big rally in 1933, the year Hitler seizes power, but that year the whole world economy was recovering, so this was pretty much average growth that cannot be attributable to any specific economic policy. More importantly, as economic policy takes time to have any measurable effects on economy, any growth in 1933 cannot be attributed to Hitler and the Nazis. At the end of the chart, you can also see how the need for large-scale conquest to grow is becoming apparent in 37 and 38. Technically, these years should automatically be higher growth years as the economy grows through the annexation of Austria and Czechoslovakia. Instead, we are seeing a slowing of GDP growth, which indicates that without annexation, the picture would be grimmer. The Nazis systematically plundered people they prosecuted and murdered. In Germany alone, they confiscated more than a year worth of GDP from German Jews, 120 billion Reichsmark. That is a redistribution of wealth in a very nasty way, and a redistribution doesn't create growth, it just moves money around. Moreover, incarcerating these people or murdering them took them out of the productive economy, so that any effect redistribution could have was nullified, As they started gobbling up nations, they did use slavery and forced labor to offset this effect, but this was too short-sighted and fairly uneconomic. In the end, we must not forget that the reason for prosecution and murder of undesirables was not financial, but ideological. So like that article was outlining with the help from the graph, there wasn't anything really remarkable about the Nazis and the economy. The main thing that distinguished them was that they would kill their own citizens and rob them and use that to fund their war effort, and their whole economy was designed for a war of conquest and plunder to prop it up. It was always a bubble that was going to burst.
So yeah, I think that article myself summed it up pretty well, that the myth of the wonderful German economy is just that. And it is obviously just trying to make Hitler look better. And like I said, you can do it out of ignorance, or you can do it because you're an anti-communist, you can do it because you're a fascist, but there's no reason to say this, because Hitler didn't rebuild the German economy in traditional means. He rebuilt it gearing up the German military to conquer and plunder other European nations. He also killed 6 million Jews and millions more people and used them as a slave labor force, right? So is that something that could be replicated somewhere else in ethical means? Is it somewhere that could be replicated just based on the economy as we understand it today? No. So are you praising Hitler for doing all that stuff to rebuild the German economy, kill millions of people, invade loads of countries, make lots of people into a slave class, literally trying to base your society on ancient Sparta, where Germans are the Spartans, Slavs are like the Helot class and stuff? Like, is that what you're praising Hitler for? It's obviously absolutely insane, but I think a lot of people are ignorant because the way history is taught is so poor. We don't really get into this. We just talk about how Hitler like rebuilt it so people loved him. Not that the capitalist class and obviously loads of fascists are all complicit in creating this terrible, basically imperial economy. But on that note, you saw a lot of comments in that comment section as well saying he loved his people. He loved the German people, which of course is just like absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, he says that. He says that because he was a politician, dictator, trying to get the support of the people to do what he wanted. He obviously didn't. He started the biggest war in history, which killed untold millions of German people in the pursuit of creating like this German empire, right? Does that sound like someone who loves his own people? Also, it's a very exclusive definition of people. Who were the German people to Hitler? They weren't all Germans. It was a very narrow view of what to be a German was. He killed millions of German Jews. Millions of German Jews who spoke German. A good number of them had actually fought in World War I for Germany, and he killed them. So how do you love your people if you're killing Germans? You're killing Germans based on their religion and ethnicity. Again, obviously, mask off fascism there. They're either too dumb to even think about it in this way because they don't believe Jews are actually counted as German citizens, or they're just bought into this propaganda and are massive fascists. But it is really concerning that these comments I'm reading are not things I hear in the fringe. Jordan Peterson is saying this shit about the German economy and stuff, right? It's these myths about Nazi Germany that have become so mainstream. I think you literally have to be like at least a liberal or a leftist to even understand that this is a Nazi myth. This is a fascist myth. And this is a fascist myth that has been allowed to thrive thanks to the Allies after World War II going so crazy anti-communist that they literally rehabilitated the image of fascists. Loads of these people love Rommel as well, but Rommel was chosen as a figure to rehabilitate as the good German. Loads of ex-Nazis joined NASA, NATO, things like that. They had to rehabilitate these people to help them fight the Soviet Union and the communist bloc. And that's why all these Nazi myths exist today, where it's relatively unchallenged, and you hear this stuff all the time. You hear admiration for Hitler, and it is far more common than it seems. So we've debunked a lot of the myths I wanted to talk about, but I just wanted to show you one more comment section. So here's another video, another Hitler speech, only 401,000 here, and what he basically says is, German comrades, do not talk of symbolic acts, but make and keep peace. I think it's just before an election. If this Sunday will grant me the trust of Germany again, we have become decent, hard-working, and energetic, and can accomplish anything with nothing to be ashamed of. What things we are working on, talking about like loads of new things they're inventing, building, things like that, we can now compare to other nations. The world can't pass judgment, only you can. I have worked hard and taken your side and devoted my life to the service of the people. Give me your vote. So the comments, 1.3 likes, stand up for me as I stood up for you. Those words got me good. I noticed that even here in the comments, people from all over the world admire this man for his dedication, conviction, and leadership. people who may well have been targets of his regime even admire this man for what he accomplished for his people and what he wanted for his people. The word leadership is truly manifested in this man we see here. Again, you have to be so stupid to think this, or a Nazi, because he killed millions of his own people, sent millions more of them to their deaths in war, literally completely destroyed Germany. As someone who doesn't come from Germany, so no brainwashing, but has learned German, I assure you, the subtitles are spot on. Thank you for uploading the uncensored truth. I would vote for Uncle H in a heartbeat. So there you see, like, obviously more Nazi revisionism about Hitler loving his people saying they would vote for Hitler. He's an amazing speaker, inspiring. He truly cared about his people. Like I said, killed millions of them in the Holocaust and then sent millions more to die. And then as Germany was crumbling all around him, they forced like literal children to fight the Soviets and the Americans. And like I said, go on these videos, go on this page, sort by popular, see all the comment sections. And that's why I think it's dangerous for this person, whoever they are, uploading these videos. Maybe they don't understand because they're Japanese. They don't understand this, and maybe they don't read the comments. I find that hard to believe. Maybe they don't read them. But you can clearly see, in the Hitler videos especially, so many people writing just flat out racism, fascist, anti-communism, really terrible things. And I'm not saying Google has to take down the videos, but it seems like Google will take down the videos because of the comment section. And that's what I say to this person, just turn the comments off, because what you're doing is giving Nazis a place to spread Nazi propaganda about Hitler. What I'm thinking is the most dangerous part is that naive, dumb people who have no clue about history and are idiots, uneducated people, are going to come to the comment section, and while they might come away still thinking, yeah, Hitler was a bad guy, they're going to be thinking about him having positive qualities and doing good things and caring about his people and being misrepresented by the Allies, because don't you know, the victors write the history all the time, and because he lost, he's smeared, he's misrepresented and all that stuff. And that's the bad things about having these videos up, and especially videos where Hitler isn't saying the most anti-Semitic, racist stuff that he does say in a lot of speeches, and then you just allow this kind of narrative to flourish even more, that he was just doing what was best for the German people. Look, he said it in a speech. The comment section are telling me, the comment section are saying that Google censors this on purpose and they don't like these translated speeches because they don't want you to know the truth. And I'm worried because there's obviously so much more fringe conspiracy stuff going around now, which ultimately always go back to Jewish communism, that having these comment section up in plain sight is actually pretty dangerous, because anyone can go watch those speeches, which you can judge if that's good or bad, but we can all agree that having an open comment section, an open forum, where like 70% of the comments are all talking about how good Hitler is actually a bad thing, and is stuff that you couldn't get away with on a lot of social media. I've seen a similar problem on TikTok, in that there's lots of videos of like Oswald Mosley, Mussolini, and other fascists, and they get away with it, and all the comment section are also praising these fascists. So it's something that social media needs to get a grip on a bit more, in that, yes, you can argue that these speeches are up for historical reasons, but open comment sections where people are all egging each other on about how good the Nazis were is obviously something that goes against Google's own rules, and is something that the person who's uploading this should be aware of and should actually turn off the comment section when you're uploading fascist speeches, in my opinion. Anyway, that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.